$1 million. Free to play. You just need to survive. It's the Fanatics NFL Survivor Pool. Pick one team to win each week. Get it right, move on. Get it wrong, you're out. The last fan standing take home a guaranteed $1 million cash prize. And for every player who joins, we add $1 to the pot, up to $10 million. The Fanatics NFL Survivor Pool. Play free on the Fanatics app. App access open to all. Must be 21 plus and joined by 9/8 to play. No purchase necessary. U.S. only. Void where prohibited. Subject to complete terms. See fanatics.com/game rules.
This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. Between two-factor authentication, strong passwords, and a VPN, you try to be in control of how your info is protected. But many other places also have it, and they might not be as careful. That's why LifeLock monitors hundreds of millions of data points a second for threats. If your identity is stolen, they'll fix it, guaranteed, or your money back. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit LifeLock.com/podcast for 40% off. Terms apply.
Duke fans, welcome to episode 748 of the DBR Podcast, the Duke Basketball Roundup. Jason Evans here for your listening pleasure. We're mostly, even though the word basketball is in the title, we're mostly going to be talking football today. But if you're a basketball fan, don't go anywhere. I promise we got some basketball content coming for you in the back half of the episode. I was recently in the second most popular gambling spot in the United States, in Atlantic City. And I happened to check out the odds. We were going to talk a little bit about who might win Player of the Year, who might win the national championship, and all those kind of things, at least according to the odds makers. But before we get to that, we're going to get to some football, and we have to get to introductions. I am Jason Evans, your host this week. I may have already said that. I'm not even sure. I don't remember.
Blame Zoom.
My buddy Donald Wine is not with us this week. Donald is he's got a very busy, crazy week coming up for him. He's like on a train right now going someplace. He has packing to do. We just couldn't quite work it out. So instead, our designated fill-in, he's here almost as much as I am lately. Scott Rich joins us on the podcast. Hey, Scott, how you doing, man?
You know, Jay, I'm excited to be here. You told me to come on to talk about a certain football game where a top 15 Big Ten team went on the road to face one of the top transfer quarterbacks in the nation. Of course, there were two games this weekend that fit that bill. I think we'll probably talk about one a little more than the other.
Yeah, okay, so wait. So people understand what you're talking about. Which is the other?
So the other one is, hint, hint, the Michigan Wolverines losing to Oklahoma. Donald and I had some fun talking about our hometown team last episode. And let's just say maybe we got a little bit over-enthused because there was a couple people in the DBR universe who told us to shut the heck up about Michigan, which, fair. We're going to slip up every now and again, especially when I'm on here, but fair.
Yeah, the game that we will be talking about is the Blue Devils contest against Illinois. Duke goes down 45-19. If you are someone who did not watch the game, if you only looked at the final score, if you're like, watching ESPN, you see those numbers scroll across the bottom of your screen, then you did not get the full story of this game. Turnovers, mental mistakes, destroyed a Duke team that otherwise looked to be every bit as good, heck, maybe even better than this Illinois club that a lot of people have ranked in the top 10 and which appears to be a team that, is a strong contender to make the college football playoff. It is easy, I think, to get down on Duke after a game like this if you only look at that final score, if you focus too much on the turnovers and the mental mistakes. But those are things that can be fixed. Those are things that are sometimes a little bit random. And if you move past that a little bit, you saw a Duke team that showed it is very capable of playing with any team in the country. I was actually impressed. And Scott, I want to start with, we got a headline from one of our listeners. Chris Emmershine loves to give us these football headlines. Chris is with me. Here's what Chris's headline was. He said, 4 fumbles and a funeral? No, we're not dead yet. Come back next Saturday. I like that, Chris. It highlights the fumbles, which were a problem. But no, Duke is not dead yet. People who are, shoveling dirt onto this grave are shoveling way too fast because If you like, look at just the yardage gained, Scott. Duke outgained Illinois 438 to 419, and that wasn't like late mop-up kind of stuff. I noticed at one point in the second half, we were like 80 yards ahead of them in terms of total yards gained, and we were trailing by more than 14 points. That's super frustrating. But
yeah, I mean, this Duke team, I believe they outgained, or it was pretty darn close, Illinois at the half. This was a team that, again, at halftime, Duke looked like the better football team. Duke looked like, notably, the more physical team. I said when Donald and I were talking about week one,
the trenches in a big way. Yeah,
exactly. When Donald and I talked about week one, I said, one of this team's strength was the returning front, the returning offensive line, but we didn't really see that in the running game. We saw that in spurts, especially in the first half against Illinois. This was a top 15 Big Ten team that very arguably Duke was beating in the trenches on both sides of the ball. Not only on offense running the ball, but on defense, we had Luke Altmaier running for his life a whole lot of the game. Luke Altmaier just happens to be very, very good and turned a lot of those plays into positive plays for the Fighting Illini. So if you look, again, I totally agree with you. The 45-19 final score is a bit of a shame because it doesn't reflect how well this Duke team played. But we have to be fair. That is the glass half full looking at this game.
True.
There is the glass half empty, which is a lot of these mistakes should not be happening to a Power 4 team in a year two of a coach who has a lot of experience with an experienced quarterback. We'll talk about a lot of these mistakes, but I don't know how the heck you have two guys with the same number go out on the punt.
Let me explain this. And not that I know the answer to this, but I'm gonna guess a little bit based on looking at the roster and things like that. So first of all, Duke has 5 turnovers in this game, but a lot of people say no, it was really 6 because the absurd 2 players with the same number penalty on a punt functionally serves as another turnover because you give Illinois back the ball and they of course immediately score a touchdown off of that. Here's how I think that happened. I didn't know this. I looked at the Duke roster. Scott, Duke has dozens of players with the same number. It's a college football team. There are way more than 100 guys on the team. And because there are limitations, if you play certain positions, you have to wear a certain number. And Duke has a lot of quarterbacks, wide receivers, cornerbacks, safeties, running backs. All those guys are like, their numbers need to be like less than 30 or something like that. As a result of that, Duke has a ton of guys with the same number. And usually it is like one guy on offense and one guy on defense. Like, I think Chandler Rivers and Andrell Anthony, I think that's it, are like, Terry Moore and Andrell Anthony are both number 1. But Terry Moore is a safety. Andrell Anthony's a wide receiver. They're not going to be on the field at the same time, you would think. And in this case, the guys who duplicated their numbers were wide receiver Jaden Moore and safety Deshaun Stone. And I think usually you would think, well, a wide receiver and a safety are not going to be on the field at the same time. But when it comes to special teams, that's where this kind of thing can happen. And I have to wonder if a coach at one point said, hey, number 8, get out there. And they both heard that and they went out. But if that happened, there would have been 12. I don't know how that happened. There'd be 12 guys in the field, not the same. So I'm confused about it. Yeah.
So here's the thing on that. You're 100% right. It's one of the quirks of college football, especially on teams with a lot of walk-ons, that you have guys with the same number. But this is something that you have to imagine, coaching-wise, has been dealt with the entire week.
Yeah.
There are the punt team.
Not the entire week, like for years.
Yeah, exactly. The punt team is a set group of people. Yes, there are multiple number 8s on the team, but I can't imagine that the punt team, that they're switching up the first and second team punt team that often for that to be an issue. And if that was an issue, maybe the coaches should say, that doesn't make a lot of sense for us to have multiple number 8s for this to get mixed up. We could go into this. I just think it just was such a glaring mistake and really turned the game. Duke was down 1 point.
Yeah.
Duke was down 1 point at half. Duke doesn't have that. We get the ball down one after the first possession in the second half. Instead, Illinois goes down and scores a touchdown. I can't remember a more consequential 5-yard penalty and such a consequential
Yeah.
boneyard 5-yard
Yeah.
bonehead 5-yard penalty in college football in a long, long time. It's something that there are reasons for it to happen, but that just can't happen if you want to be taking the step forward in quality that this Duke football program is trying to. That was old Duke. That was old shoot yourselves in the foot, always close,
no
but
offense to
never
Carl
finishing
Franks.
Duke.
No offense to Carl Franks. That's Carl Franks Duke. I mean, it is. Yeah.
And so, yes, there's plenty of good to take from this. I think that Manny Diaz will be able to distill that out and give his team what he needs from this game. But as a Duke fan, you sort of thought that we're past this. You sort of thought that we're past those type of plays, kicking us in the, shooting ourselves in the foot. But it wasn't the only time we shot ourselves in the foot, lest we forget. We had many, many chances to get over that play and still make it a competitive game. But over and over again, these turnovers, these silly mistakes, these letting Luke Altmaier loose out of what seemed to be a sack into a big play, that was what plagued Duke. It wasn't one play. It was one play that turned into a bunch more plays, that allowed a bunch more mistakes to lead to a 45-19 final score.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to focus really quick on the good, and then we can move on from this game. I'll start with Andrel Anthony. I was super excited when this guy transferred in. He has a great pedigree. He has played for big time programs. He was
What's one of those programs, Jason?
Oklahoma.
Yes, that was his most recent school. Let's move on.
I thought he was an absolute star in this game. The TD catch where he dragged his tippy toe on the back of the end zone turf, that was sublime. I mean, that was just a beautiful. I will tell you that when the officials called it a touchdown, I was like, oh, there's no way he got down. How are they calling that a touchdown? I was sure that they were wrong, and then the replay showed. I mean, hey, props to the officials. That was really, really good. Eyes on the toe.
That might not have been a touchdown if there wasn't a turf field, if you couldn't see the turf getting up by his toe, because I don't know how you see that foot down otherwise.
Yeah, it was truly impressive. I have to say that considering the Duke wide receiver core again had a case of the drops. There were a couple balls. There was a touchdown pass. Now it would have come back for a penalty, but there was a clear touchdown pass. I want to say it was Jaden Moore, maybe. That was dropped. The guy was wide open. Darian Mensah threw a perfect ball, and the dude just bobbled it. It was terrible. I think maybe Duke should just let's throw the ball a little more to Barkate and Anthony, because those two guys, the two transfers, seem like the most sure-handed guys on the team. We're not going to get into what Quayshawn Brown did on a punt. And speaking of sure hands, we're just going to leave that aside. But I'm impressed with the transfers in the wide receiver core. And again, I thought Andrel Anthony looked outstanding. Darian Mensah, speaking of the transfer, another big statistical game, 334 yards passing, but the fumbles are bad. He has to be able to sense where the defense is a little bit better. He had one of those where he was in the pocket way too long. You could see the D collapsing around him, and he needs to say, I either need to tuck this, I need to get rid of this, but I've held on to it for too long, especially because we're in the red zone. So many of the turnovers seem to come at either in our red zone on one end or in our defensive red zone on the other. It's just, oh God, it was terrible. I'll also say really quickly about Mensah, in terms of the play calling, Scott, I think you probably feel the same way as me on this. I feel like we've talked about it. Duke likes to roll Mensah out. They like him on the move, and he's a very, very good quarterback on the move. I think they're falling back on that a little too much. It limits the size of the field. And, unless you have, I don't know, Patrick Mahomes, unless you have a guy who can turn his body and go back across his body in a way that is really, really difficult to do. When you roll a quarterback out, you're functionally saying, hey, this field, an NFL field is 30 yards wide, whatever it is. You're cutting it in half, or at least you're cutting a third of it off. And I think it allows the defense, a little more space to get in there and cover your wide receivers. I'm not saying get rid of it completely, but I would like us to maybe not roll Mensah out, designed rollouts, quite as much, because I think we're limiting the space for our wide receivers.
I texted you during the game. One of my least favorite play calls in all of football is a rollout on a 2-point conversion, because you are taking an already compressed field and
Yes.
making it even more compressed. Where unless you are a true running threat, unless one of the options on that play is to stick your foot in the ground and cut into the end zone, you're basically giving the defense the numbers advantage. I hated that we did that the one time that we did go for two in this game. And I agree with you. I think that in the college game, rolling out is a benefit if and only if your quarterback is going to take the ball upfield, if that's one of the options that the defense has to respect. Maybe that's part of Mensa's game that he's going to try to develop. Maybe that would be something that I imagine would take his draft stock up for going to the next level. If he adds that to his game, maybe he becomes a little bit more on the NFL radar. But until that happens, keep him in the pocket. He's very good at reading the field. Give him the whole field to read, because that is, so far I would say Darian Mensa's superpower is his ability to quickly process the field and find the right guy to get the ball
Yeah.
to. I don't see why our play calling should be hindering that and should be giving him less freedom as opposed to more.
I obviously completely agree with you. Last thing I want to talk about from this game is the defense. Considering Illinois put up 45 points, I thought Duke's D was very strong. This was a much better Duke defense than we saw week one against Elon. Especially before the defense got worn out. All the turnovers, I think, really took something out of our defense late in the game. But we kept on sending the D back onto the field. But we had 4 sacks. We had 10 tackles for loss against a team that is as strong, as we said, playoff contender, one of the better teams in the Big Ten. There was one point like midway through the second quarter, I think, where Illinois had more negative plays than positive plays. I mean, on the game. That is super impressive. And shout out, of course, to Vincent Anthony Jr., who lived in the Illinois backfield. I mean, their quarterback was seeing Vincent Anthony in his sleep last night. And the Duke, I was worried about the Duke D after week one. Not worried anymore. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I think that the defensive line is obviously going to be a strength of this Duke team, and I think that's going to be a storyline moving forward. If Duke is going to win the more challenging games on its schedule that it has to potentially compete in the ACC, you have to make opposing quarterbacks feel that pressure. And we've shown now in 2 weeks in a row that we can do that. We've shown now that we can do this against, again, a Big Ten caliber team, a Big Ten caliber offensive line. That continuing to be a pattern is arguably, I think, going to be the difference between Duke being a real ACC contender and not. Because we've seen that the offense can do it when it's not shooting itself in the foot. We know what Chandler Rivers can do, basically taking away half the field, as a defensive back. The last piece of that puzzle is, can the front seven defensively do enough against the more physical, the bigger teams in the ACC? 2 games in, I think we're seeing some evidence that it can. But again, that's going to need to be a longer storyline before we think that we're going to compete with Clemson midway through the year.
Speaking of Clemson, I want to do a couple ACC notes very quickly, and then I've got a couple interesting little national notes. And feel free to jump in or add whatever you would like. My ACC notes start with Clemson Tigers. They were in some huge trouble against Troy. Clemson ended up, this was a come from behind victory. Clemson was trailing 16-3 at one point, and they scored 24 points in a row in the second half. But this is a very troublesome result. This was a very competitive, close game, well into the fourth quarter. Clemson against Troy. This is the Clemson clubs that everyone had in the top 5 preseason. Everyone had them there, and both of their first 2 weeks, they have not looked the part. So I wonder a bit, maybe Clemson was severely overrated. A couple other ACC teams I want to mention. Virginia Tech. Vanderbilt crushed them 44-20. Now, far be it for a Duke fan, Duke just lost by a somewhat similar score to Illinois, but this was not the same kind of game. This was not the Hokies were outgained by Vandy by 250 yards, and make no mistake, Vandy is no Illinois. It's amazing to me how far Virginia Tech has fallen from the Frank Beamer years. There was a time that, Virginia Tech was alongside Clemson and like Florida State, Miami, one of these ACC teams that every year was a contender for the top 10. And they have really, really not gotten. Vandy scored 34 points on them in the second half. Virginia Tech had 0. 34-0 in the second half against Vanderbilt. Ouch. And then I want to mention Carolina. I mean, look, we're Duke fans. We're going to talk about UNC. We're going to talk about Bill Belichick, the biggest story in college football. Went from being the biggest story because everyone thought he'd be successful to being the biggest story because maybe not. So they beat Charlotte 20-0. I'm sorry, 20-3. 20-3, but the total yards in this game were almost even. Charlotte actually had time of possession over Carolina. Charlotte missed a chippy 26-yard field, just a nothing 26-yard field goal that they missed. They failed to convert a fourth down on the UNC 20. They had an interception on 1st and goal. I mean, like, this game should have been way, way closer. I mean, if they merely kick the 26-yard field goal, the fourth down, field goal on the 20-yard line, if they convert when they had 1st and goal instead of throwing an interception, well, that's an extra 13 points. That's 20-19, Scott. I mean, this game should have been really, really close. And it's worth noting, Charlotte's not good. They lost their opening game 34-11 to App State. Now, no offense to App State, but they lost 34-11 to App State. Charlotte did. And Clemson only beats them 20-3 in a game that was much, much, much closer than the score indicates. You have to start to wonder, is UNC going to win any games in the ACC? They're probably only going to be favored like maybe once or twice. Yeah, Wake Forest is pretty bad, and they play them. They play both Cal and Stanford, both of whom Stanford especially looks really, really bad. Carolina gets a overmatched Richmond team next week. That should be another win. But after that, they've got games against Central Florida and Clemson. And I think they're going to be big underdogs in both of those, like double-digit underdogs perhaps, in both of those games. This season could go south on Bill Belichick very quickly.
I think if you're a Carolina fan, you are readying remember what happened in the first couple years in Bill Belichick in New England? That didn't go well either. You might be readying that historical comparison to get yourselves through this year. We may be counting our chickens before they hatch too. There's so many transfers.
But Bill Belichick is not going to be. I don't think Bill Belichick's going to be at Carolina for 4, 5, 7+ years.
I mean, it certainly seems like he's trying to set it up to just sort of hand off to his son, but that's speculation for another time. You might just need to get the program in a good enough shape for that. A couple other ACC results that I think are worth noting. Syracuse had to fight back hard to beat UConn at home. We think of UConn as an also-ran in football, but they're a team that is, despite being the only, trivia note, they're the only independent left besides Notre Dame. They had a decent year last year, made a bowl game. UConn is making a bit of a investment in the football program with future realignment in mind. So on that, in reality, not that alarming of a result, but because of UConn being better than national people think, but alarming enough of a performance from Syracuse that the Syracuse coach ended up having his team run sprints in the stadium in front of the remaining fans after the game, trying to pull out some sort of, Mighty Ducks, movie magic style, punishment. You won the game, but you didn't play hard enough, so we're going to run sprints after the game. That's going to either go over really well or really, really poorly with that team. It could go one of two ways. I think it only can go one of those two extremes. I think it's going to be an interesting thing to note how Syracuse goes down the line. Another interesting, data point was that another close loss was BC losing to Michigan State in overtime. Yes, Michigan State is in the bottom half of the Big Ten, but that's another missed opportunity for the ACC to have a notch on the board and say the ACC beat a Big Ten team, beat an SEC team. All the more unfortunate because it was due to that silly we have to go for two type of thing, which I think is turning college football overtime into penalty kicks.
I hate that. I hate it.
No one has a better solution, but this one can't be it. But that's again a discussion for another time. So the ACC in the other eight missed opportunity, of course, was SMU, one of the ranked teams in the ACC, absolutely blowing a game against Baylor and doing that at home. So the ACC, after a decent week one, seems to sort of be setting itself up as a close but not no cigar conference, which is not good when it comes to trying to make the argument that you should have more than one team in the college football playoff.
Yeah, I'm not. The only saving grace is I feel like the top of the ACC may be a little bit better. The mid bottom, yeah, maybe not so much. But the top,
it's going to be. So the issue is going to be those top teams, the Clemsons and the Miamis and the Florida States. When the rest of your conference is mid or worse, you have no breathing room.
That is very true.
It's going to be very. I would argue it. Again, week two, but at this snapshot in time, it's going to be difficult for a 2-loss ACC team to make it in if two of those losses are against not so great ACC teams based upon how they performed in the non-conference. It's early, but it's going to be a lot easier to get in as a 2-loss Big Ten SEC team. It's going to be really hard to get in as a 2-loss ACC team at this point.
All right, so I want to do a quick note about Florida State. If you have children in the vehicle with you while you're listening to this, cover their ears because I'm about to use a bad word. So Florida State beat East Texas A&M. The East Texas A&M, a traditional power in college football. I didn't even know that East Texas A&M was in Division I. They've apparently been in Division I.
I didn't even know that was a school.
Yeah, exactly.
That sounds like a pretend school you made up on, the college football video game.
East Texas A&M joined Division I football in 2022. They've been around all of 3 years now. Florida State beat them 77-3. So I just happened to click on this box score I did not watch this game, Scott.
I don't think many people did, Jason.
No. I clicked on the box score just really quick. I was like, oh, maybe there's some, wild offensive, Florida State had 700 yards of offense. I'm like, yeah. And I happened to notice something. In a game that Florida State won 77-3, I need to say that score like 3 or 4 more times just to drive it home. Florida State went for it on 4th down 3 times. They were 3 for 3 on 4th down. One of them was fairly early in the game. Okay, I can buy that. That's fine. One of them was when they were up 28-0 with 12 minutes left in the second quarter. Again, 28-0. Just the start of the second quarter, you were clearly blowing the pants off of this team. They had a 4th and 3 at their own 47, and Florida State went for it. They, of course, got a 57-yard touchdown on that play. A 53-yard touchdown on that play. So they, 28-0, they went for it. The last time that they went for it on 4th down, Scott, the score was 70-0. 70-0. They had a 4th and 8 from the East Texas A&M 42. 4th and 8. Just punt it, you assholes. Just punt it.
That had to have been an interesting handshake between the coaches, one would think, after that.
What are you doing going for it on 4th and 8 when you're up 70-0? Okay, you're on their 42. I know that a punt probably isn't going to net you many yards. I guess you hope you pin them inside their 20 or something like that. What are you doing? 70-0. What are you doing going for it on 4th down? You assholes. I'm sorry. That is an asshole thing to do. Hey, Florida State, am I the asshole? Yes. Yes, you are the asshole. Scott, any comments?
I can't wait for this to get edited and packaged in some Florida State fan site to just turn you into public enemy number 1. It's going to be...
I got no problem. They went for it on... Now, granted, at 70-0, it was probably like the 5th stringers playing. Probably the announcers couldn't even tell who it was because it was guys so deep on the depth chart. They're not on the depth chart. I get it. They probably pulled people out of the stands, and they're like, hey, let them go for it. But it's 70-0, Scott. Please, Florida State, show a little grace. They stopped you. It's 4th and 8. Why are you going for it on 4th and 8 when you lead by 70-0?
I will say I was on last week when I was on with Donald. I said it wasn't good optics for a team that was supposedly a blue blood like Florida State to rush the field after winning week 1. Combine that with that, you might argue that Florida State sort of forgot how to win after one down year.
There you go. All right, last football note. I promise. Okay, wait, sorry, I have 2 of them. They both involve the state of Kansas. The first one is Kansas State, which is a team that was ranked in the preseason. Kansas State, you're going to hear Kansas State a lot during the basketball season. They're boosters. Well, there's one specific guy who's a Kansas State alum who is spending a lot of money on NIL. Kansas State has bought a heck of a roster in football this year and in basketball. This football team, as I said, preseason ranked. They lost their opening game, like they played in Ireland against Iowa or someone like that. I forget who it was.
And the Aer Lingus Classic.
Yeah. So they were playing Army. They paid Army. This is one of those buy games. It's not like a home and home or anything. You find a smaller school. You pay them money to come play on your field. They paid Army over $1.1 million. Scott, you know how this turns out. Army won the game. Army was playing their backup quarterback. Their main quarterback was out. Army played their backup quarterback. They beat Kansas State at Kansas State, and Kansas State wrote them a check for $1.1 million. I love that. That is amazing.
As John Rothstein says on Twitter, the epitome of brutality when you lose a bye game like that.
Yeah, exactly. And then the last one is a little gambling note. All right, so Missouri against Kansas. A classic rivalry. Like, these teams have been separated by conferences, but Missouri and Kansas do not like each other. Do not like each other at all. Missouri was leading this game 35-31. They have the ball. There's like 2 minutes left. They got second down at their own 35. 35-31, Missouri's leading by 4. Missouri was a 7.5-point favorite. Even if they drive down the field a little bit and kick a field goal, even if they get a first down or 2 and just run out the clock, if you got Kansas plus 7.5, you're feeling pretty darn good right now. You figure either they're going to run out the clock or they're going to have to punt the ball and Kansas gets the ball back. You've got this win in your back pocket. And then, of course, and by the way, they're running the ball. Like, there's no passing play there. If there's 2 minutes left and you've got a lead, you're not passing the ball. You're not risking stopping the clock for the opposing team. You're running it. And Missouri did that. They ran it. They ran it all of 65 yards into the end zone for a touchdown. A brutal cover. Just a brutal.
That wasn't even the
cover.
worst one. That was not even the worst one of those of the week.
Tell me.
The worst one of those of the week was in Ole Miss, Kentucky, where Ole Miss was up 10 with under 2 minutes to go. Kentucky had no timeouts, but Kentucky drove down the field, got to around the 20-yard line, and with 20 seconds to go, did what they should do, kicked the field goal, so you can hopefully get the onside kick and throw to Hail Mary. That field goal not only covered the spread, but I think it made it from the under to the over. Oh. So that meaningless field goal, that's why if you're going to gamble, I just say you pick the winner and you pick the loser, because no one who's actually playing the games gives a crap about the line. So weirdness like that is going to happen, and you're just going to have to explain to your partner why you lost the mortgage for this month. That gambling, why I don't gamble, sorry FanDuel or whoever advertises on this podcast. Why I don't gamble 101.
Okay, speaking of gambling, we're going to take a quick break. We've been yammering about football for a while. On the other side, can you guess who the favorite is to win the College Basketball Player of the Year this year? Can you guess who the favorite is to win the ACC? I guess it's Duke, but yeah, you know what I'm saying. We're going to do a little odd stuff. I was in Atlantic City. I got some good odds for you. We're going to have that in just a moment.
Between busy schedules and summer plans, sometimes all I've got is a couple minutes. Factor helps me eat smarter with tasty, chef-prepped meals that are dietitian approved and delivered right to my door. And now, with more than 65 weekly meals made for how I live and what I like to eat, I've got even more ways to fit in a real meal wherever the day takes me.
Yeah, that's right, Donald. Not only are they quick to heat up, but now you have a wider selection of meal options, including premium seafood meals like salmon and shrimp at no extra cost. And for the first time, try Asian-inspired meals with bold flavors from China, Thailand, and more. It's responding to what Factor members wanted. That's why 97% of customers say Factor has helped them to live a healthier life. Feel the difference no matter what your routine is.
So eat smart at factormeals.com/DukeBB50 off. Use that code DukeBB50 off to get 50% off your first box plus free breakfast for 1 year. That's code DukeBB50 off at factormeals.com for 50% off your first box plus free breakfast for 1 year. Get delicious, ready-to-eat meals delivered with Factor. Offer only valid for new Factor customers with code and qualifying auto-renewing subscription purchase.
Back from the break, Jason Evans with Scott Rich. By the way, I apologize. I think I had the wrong mic selected for the first half of the show, so I probably sounded like shit. Hopefully I sound better.
Things Scott should have told Jason at the beginning rather than halfway through the episode.
Yeah, dude, if I don't sound good, tell me right away. In any event, as I mentioned, I was in Atlantic City. I was at the Jersey Shore for a few weeks. I'm sure all of you who are faithful listeners are aware of this now. And I never venture to Vegas or Atlantic City or any place else where they do sports betting without checking out the lines on college basketball. The lines for a whole bunch of stuff just recently came out. And so I just want to go through a couple of them. And Scott, I've shared these with you, so maybe you can tell me which ones you find really interesting. Let's start with, of course, the odds to win the national championship. The favorite is the Purdue Boilermakers. They're at 9-1. Houston is at 10-1, and then Duke and UConn are both at 12-1. To give you a couple other teams that are in the running, St. John's in Florida are at 16-1. Michigan and Kentucky at 18-1. BYU, Texas Tech at 20-1. And then I wanted to mention a couple other ACC teams. Louisville is at 25-1. Carolina's at 50-1. NC State and Virginia, each at 80-1. Scott, do any of those strike you as particularly good wagers?
I mean, I've been going back and forth on how to interpret the Duke number, because that is obviously a bit of an outlier compared to all of the way too early rankings that sort of have Duke more in the 8 to 12-ish range.
Right.
I think the reality is Duke the fourth best team in the country, as those odds say? No. Are they the 8 to 12?
Tied for third. Not fourth,
yeah.
Tied for third.
So it's hard to parse that. Is that just the Duke pricing of Duke is very popular? There is a lot of bets on Duke.
That's a lot of it. That is a lot of it.
And I think that if you're a glass half empty, that's what you're saying. If you're a glass half full, you're saying, oh, Vegas knows something that these prognosticators don't. Again, the reality is something in the middle. I will say the thing that struck me most from those odds was the fact that there's a very clear sort of top tier and then drop off, right? Purdue, Duke, UConn, and the one other team you mentioned, Houston, are all very clustered at the top. And then there's a drop off when you get to those second tier teams like Michigan and whatnot who are national title hopefuls. I think that in itself is interesting, that Vegas seems to have tiered off these teams to start. It will be interesting to see how that develops. It's also interesting to note that some of these teams that were very, very buzzy in terms of who they got in portal additions and whatnot aren't the teams at the top. The teams that are at the top in terms of Vegas are the teams that have more returning, that are betting on their own players. Purdue is the epitome of this, but Duke is obviously doing that this year. Houston has obviously been doing this for years and years. UConn's sort of 50-50 at this stage with how disappointing they were last year, but their biggest guys are going to be returners. So Vegas seems to be saying we want returning continuity, supplemented with a few big guys, more than we're going to take a risk on this big transfer name. Is that going to factor in? I think that's interesting. And again, I'm always of the mindset I trust Vegas a little bit more than random ESPN guy who's writing a way too early ranking. Because if Vegas is wrong, Vegas loses a bunch of money. And we all know Vegas doesn't like to lose money. So there's there's always a Duke price involved because the random person is going to go put money on Duke. But it's not so much that number is that far of an outlier away from maybe what it truly should be.
Yeah. And the team that I see in there that I'm sort of most interested in, and I didn't put any money on this team, but I kind of like Texas Tech at 20-1 there. They got JT Toppin back. He is really good. They paid a lot of money for that roster. And to me, 20-1 on Texas Tech that's longer odds than they probably deserve. Hey, I want to move on to a couple other interesting little things. The ACC, you can bet on which team will win the ACC. Duke is 11-5, functionally 2.2-1. UNC and Louisville are next at 3.5-1. I'm not sure I'm sold on UNC tied with Louisville for the best odds in the ACC, 7-2, 3.5-1. And I kind of, if you think, Duke may be a little young, maybe have some trouble meshing all the different parts together. Boy, Louisville at 3.5-1, 7-2. I think that's a bet that would intrigue me a lot for the ACC. NC State and Virginia are both at 12-1. Miami and SMU at 18-1. Hey, props to Jay Lucas at Miami to have them, functionally in the top 6 in the conference, top 6-7 in the conference, according to the Vegas odds makers. I think that's very interesting. You see anything you like in the ACC odds?
I'm sort of taking the opposite stance on Louisville. I think that Louisville is getting a lot of credit for bringing in the big name transfers but with no corresponding caution of, is this going to meld together? Again, for every team that has brought in a bunch of big name transfers and gotten deep in March, there's another team that has completely cratered and missed the tournament. So it's hard for me to think that Louisville is necessarily going to be, at the same level of Duke when it comes to ACC contenders until they show me something in ACC play. I'm not putting any money on Louisville at that line at this stage of the game. At this point, I think it's a homer thing to say, but I think it's hard to put money on anybody outside of Duke to win the ACC, given what happened last year, unless you think that Duke having a harder than usual schedule means that they may not win the regular season, and that's what you're betting on. If you're going down that line, you could make the argument that some of the home and away that Duke has, I imagine we'll talk about more in the lead up to the season, the fact that Duke's rivalry game is 2 games against UNC, you could argue,
and we also get Louisville, 2 with UNC and 2 with Louisville. That's
exactly. So you could argue could be one of those years where Duke is the best team, but one of these other teams, a Clemson or something like that, sneaks in and wins the regular season title just by basis of matchups. That would be the only logic I would see to bet on someone else and maybe try to take a sort of long odds Hail Mary if it's on someone to win the ACC.
Yeah, the team that would interest me there would be NC State at 12-1. I really think they could be intriguing. And speaking of NC State, I'm going to talk about Player of the Year contenders, because there's an NC State player that is among the leading Player of the Year contenders. Duke fans need to be aware of what's going on at NC State. First of all, the leading guy for Player of the Year, according to the Vegas odds makers or the Atlantic City odds makers, they're one and the same, is Braden Smith of Purdue, the Purdue point guard. He's 18-5. That's functionally 3.6-1. 18-5, Braden Smith to win Player of the Year. Then a transfer is the second pick, Yaxel Landeborg, who went from UAB over to Michigan, a big man who does it all, or did it all when he was at UAB, and is now being counted on to be a big player for Michigan. He's 8-1. I'll be honest with you, Scott. I'm very surprised that Landeborg is the second pick. Moving from UAB to Michigan, expecting him to put up the same. He put up like a little less than 18 points per game and like 8 rebounds per game, like 3 or 4 assists per game at UAB. I got to think those numbers come down a little bit in the. Sorry, I think I said 8. He was like 11 rebounds per game. I think those numbers come down a bit in the Big Ten, and I just think it's tough for a big man to win Player of the Year.
So here's the opposing argument, and the background of this is Landeberg would have been a first-round pick if he went out this year.
Well,
He was
very late first rounder. Yes.
he was arguably him and JT Toppin were probably the only guys who were likely first round picks who returned.
Yes, I would agree with that. Yeah.
The argument for Landenberg is that Dusty May is going to put him and basically have him be Danny Wolf 2.0, and arguably a much, much better. Danny Wolf was fantastic. He was a revelation for Michigan, but he was not an athletic specimen by any measure. Landenberg is an athletic guy. That's why he was getting strong looks from the NBA despite playing only at UAB. And the other thing that you have to keep in mind is that Landenberg wasn't the only big Michigan transfer. Our old nemesis Elliot Cadeau is also at Michigan, and Elliot Cadeau is nothing if not a pass-first point guard.
That's a great
You
point.
could make the argument that Landenberg in the Danny Wolf 4 role with a pass-happy point guard is going to be something that is going to put up big numbers. Again, you never know how a guy like that is going to do ramping up to play in the Big Ten. But the other thing to keep in mind is he's not going to play the center for Michigan. Michigan also brought in two other fairly big name transfers to be the center. Ade Mara, who's a 7'3" guy at UCLA, who was buried at the depth chart there for no conceivable reason, and also Morez Johnson, who we avoided playing. He was on Illinois. We missed him in that matchup because he was injured. So again, Landenberg is going to play the 4. He's going to play the prototypical stretch 4 with two big guys in the middle soaking up that damage and a pass-first point guard. If he lives up to the hype, he could put up big numbers. Again, there are a lot of ifs there, but there's a lot of ifs for any of these propositions probably outside of Braden Smith.
So up next, again, we said Braden Smith is about 3.6 to 1. Landenberg is 8 to 1. Up next, each one of them at 9 to 1 are the 3 stud freshmen. And frankly, this is where I would be putting my money. AJ Dybansa, Darren Peterson, and Cam Boozer are each 9 to 1 to win National Player of the Year. I think Dybansa at 9 to 1. I'm sorely tempted to put some money there, if only because I think BYU is going to feed him the ball again and again and again. And they'll probably be disappointed if he doesn't score like 22 points a game. I think his points per game may be so eye-popping that people just, award him Player of the Year based on that. And then after that, JT Toppin is at 10 to 1. Frankly, I would probably make JT Toppin my second pick of all the guys out there. Texas Tech is going to be really, really good. You talked about JT Toppin a moment ago, that if they had not paid him, I've heard that they're paying him $4 million plus a year to come back as opposed to going into the NBA draft. JT Toppin, I think, is going to have a huge season at Texas Tech this year.
I think that the Dybansa and Peterson are interesting propositions because if you put the money on them, you're not only putting the money on them being stellar players, but you're putting a little bit of money on their teams being probably better than they're projected to be right now. Because you're not going to win National Player of the Year if your team isn't, a top 10, maybe top 20-ish team. Kansas right now isn't there. Kansas could be the Darren Peterson show and question mark outside of maybe Flory Badunga. And then again, BYU, there's a lot of question marks as to do those pieces meld together. That might be a very expensive roster, but we have so many instances of an expensive roster not coming together and being productive. So those would be two risky propositions for me because again, you're basically betting on two things, both their productivity and their teams doing better than expected. I like the Toppin. I'm with you. I like Toppin. Toppin was a fantastic player last year. He's on a team that has a record of being competitive at a national stage, and he's more experienced. He has the combination of age and NBA level talent. Of all those guys, I think that's the best bet. Braden Smith is a great player. I think it was a fun, week in the rumorverse when there were rumors of Braden Smith might be wanting to go somewhere else for his senior year, blah, blah, blah. I think Purdue fans are very happy that didn't happen. I think most of college basketball would have loved to have Braden Smith on their team.
Oh, yeah.
And I think if Purdue's the number one team in the country as they're projected to be, it's going to be really hard to argue anyone else besides him is going to win that award.
Well, his teammate, Trey Kaufman-Wren, is also in the running. Trey Kaufman-Renn is at 18 to 1 to win Player of the Year, and I wonder how much those two guys split the vote a little bit. But I think that almost every time Trey Kaufman-Renn scores, it's off a Braden Smith pass. So, yeah. So maybe when Trey Kaufman-Renn gets 20 points, Braden Smith gets like eight assists. So that could be a big part of Braden Smith's campaign. I wanted to mention two other guys who are in the running here, who I think are worth talking about. First one, Darian Williams, who had been at Texas Tech, is now at NC State. NC State has a player who's like considered among the top 7 or 8 guys for National Player of the Year. Duke fans need to pay attention to Darian Williams. Dude can play, and we're gonna get a heavy dose of him in ACC play. And then Bryce Hopkins is at St. John's. He's at 35 to 1 to win National Player of the Year. If Bryce Hopkins stays healthy, he will be a major contender for this award. He had an ACL tear that limited him in the 23-24 season. He came back last year in December, almost immediately suffered a bone bruise, so he only played 3 games. So he is now a 5th-year senior. If he's 23, by the way, today's his birthday. I looked it up. Happy birthday to Bryce Hopkins. If he stays healthy for the full year for St. John's, unless Ian Jackson explodes and takes over that St. John's team, Bryce Hopkins could put up big numbers for St. John's. He's put up big numbers in the Big East in the past. And you want a long shot. If you want to put some money out there, 35 to 1 on Bryce Hopkins on a St. John's team that a lot of people think is going to be in the top 5 all year long, I could be a really good pick.
It'll be interesting to see again. That is a proposition of, do you think a lot of new pieces are going to gel together?
Yeah.
That is why Vegas makes a whole heck of a lot of money on these bets in the offseason where we are all just guessing. That's why FanDuel or DraftKings, whoever sponsors this podcast, makes a heck of a lot of money off of all of us, because no one freaking knows. And if you're just throwing a dart at the board, you may hit, but a lot of other people aren't. And that is why the house always wins.
Hey, super fast. There were some other ones. I had no idea that you could bet on these things in Atlantic City. But any player to average a triple-double on the season, anyone in all of college basketball averages a triple-double, you can get 300 to 1 on that. I don't think that's a good bet, Scott. It's been a long time since someone averaged a triple-double in college basketball. Any player to win the Wooden Award and the national title. That's a really interesting bet. Like JT Toppin could be, or Trey Kaufman-Renn, or Braden Smith. These are some really interesting bets there. 7 to 1 on a player to win the Wooden Award and the Player of the Year and the national title. Cooper Flagg, so close to happening last year. 7 to 1 odds on that. A team to go undefeated on the season. When's the last time a team went undefeated? Was it? It was Kentucky. Indiana, wasn't it?
Or Kentucky was in the regular season. Indiana was the last one to do it all the way through to the national title.
Yeah, it was 1976, 77, 77, I think. Whatever it was. It was a long damn time ago.
Look, Gonzaga was the most recent one in the regular season. Sorry, before I mess up. They didn't pull it all the way off. Exactly.
They did not win the national title. Anything to go undefeated in the entire season, 125 to 1. I think that's another bad bet. And the last one, I think this is amazing. A team to finish in the top 5 in both the KenPom offensive and defensive ratings at the end of the year. Yes, well, betting it will happen. 1.6 to 1. Really low odds on that. Betting against it happening, you can get 2 to 1. Scott, I did some research. So in the past, since 2010, Duke did it in 2010. Since Duke did it in 2010, which is 15 years, there have only been 4 teams that were top 5 KenPom in both offense and defense. Last year's Duke team, the UConn team the year before in 2024, the national championship team, and there are 2 others, and I blanked. I think the Kentucky team in 2015, and there's one other, I forget who it was. Oh, it was Villanova in like 2018 or 2019. Are the only teams top 5 offense and defense. I think I kind of feel like I should have bet some money on this not happening. 2 to 1 odds on it not happening. It feels like this is a bit of a long shot. I was surprised at those odds.
Well, okay, hold on. Well, let's do the math. If you're getting 2 to 1 odds, they're basically saying there's about a 1 in 3 chance of that happening. You just said that there were 4 teams that did it in the last 15 years.
No. 2-1. 2-1 mean it wasn't 1-2. It's 2-1. Oh wait, actually I looked at it wrong, Scott. It's 1-2. You're right.
Anytime you
200.
think,
You're right. That is a good bet. That now it makes sense. Now the bet is not as good as I thought it was.
anytime you think you've beat Vegas or you've beat Atlantic City, you're probably the fool. And we just dissected that in real time.
I misread that. I thought it was plus 200. It's minus 200. This is why I don't make money gambling. Actually, I do usually, but this is why I had a very bad run in Atlantic City this past time. What can I say? I got flushed out a lot against my 2 pairs. All right. With that, oh my God, we've been on here for a long time. He is Scott Rich. I'm Jason Evans. Scott, thanks again for filling in for Donald. Donald and I will be back in the next few days, I'm sure. We're looking for a little bit of basketball news to happen for us. We're looking for a football team to play another game. See how the football team does. We're looking for gambling opportunities.
We're gonna start analyzing, European darts and the odds that we're getting on that. That'll be how we fill the summer.
2-1 and 1-2, not the same betting odds. All right. I'm Scott. I'm Jason. He's Scott. And this is the Duke Band playing us out and taking us home.